All right, tonight, Elaine is with us. She's going to tell us about an uncle that she never knew, but who flew with the Army Air Forces in World War II. You've got her information right there. So, Elaine, with no further ado.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to talk to these museums. They're really interesting. It's a good thing that the history is here. So, my name, like I said, is Elaine Balsley, and I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Don't hold that against me. I'm not going to give a speech, but I'm just going to tell you a true story, which is near and dear to my heart, and it's very personal. Before I begin, I'd like to give you some of my background that was a great help and influence in writing my book, Letters from the War Between the Lines. Since I was a little kid, I always loved airplanes. My dad, Carl Brethauer, was a light plane flight instructor at a local airport. He'd take me for rides in the plane and let me take the controls too. And we'd take off from this grass strip, and it was bumpy. It was a tail dragger light plane. And I'd be sitting in the back with the stick and everything. And in Pittsburgh, there's hills everywhere. So you get a good start, because if you don't make that takeoff, there's a hill there. So we made it. We had a good time. My dad, we could fly at that time. Back then, you could fly anywhere. You could dive bomb your house and do this with your wings and say hi to everybody. It's not that much fun anymore. But he would take me to do loops and barrel rolls and whatever. And I think he stalled the plane every once in a while just to put my heart in my throat. But I trusted him explicitly. He was in the Army Air Corps. He was an air transport co-pilot on a Douglas C-54. And he had many stories to tell. He flew into and out of Kwajalein Island. And he was always looking out, they were always looking out for the Goonie boards, because if one got into the engines, you were kind of done. So my mother, Elizabeth, was a talented artist, and she taught me how to draw and paint. Another thing she taught me was good writing skills. You're wondering why I'm mentioning the airplanes, the flying, the artwork, and the writing? Because of my parents' influence, my interests are varied. And I came to find the diversity to be a great advantage in the future, especially for this book. I'm a published author through my documents written during my past employment, and now the book that brought me to this museum. Cap, my husband of 50 years, we moved from Pittsburgh to Dayton for his job, and he's been so supportive of everything that I do. When we made the move, we also asked my mother to live with us. Once settled in our new Dayton home, we eventually put my mother's Pittsburgh house up for sale. So while I was packing, I noticed a box full of letters that were written by my mother's brother, Bill McCoy, affectionately known as Billy. When I was growing up, I remember Mom and her sister Anna always talking about him. Oh, it was like Billy this, Billy did that, Billy, And I knew he was a B-17 tail gunner, and he was killed in World War II. But nothing more than that, the usual brother-sister shenanigans stuff. He must have been a lot of fun, I think, because he was always teasing my mother all the time. So when I was supposed to be packing, packing my mother's house, I saw a box in the basement, and I opened the box, and it was her brother's letters to her and to my aunt, and all these other papers, documents, War Department documents, pictures, whatever. I couldn't believe it. I sat there and I opened one, and then I opened another one, and I opened it, so I couldn't stop reading. So not only, all this information was in there. And especially the crew picture, she wrote all the names on the back and their positions in the bomber. I mean, she didn't miss a thing.
Did you see the box this lady brought in? While you were here, this lady,
I saw
and they were
something.
going to throw it out.
Yeah, right.
It had medals and pictures.
Yeah, you can't destroy that stuff.
And they were going to throw it out. She said it'd be a shame, so she brought it in here.
Yeah. it's good that she brought it, because you need to save all this stuff.
Yeah.
The letters to the War Department, to my grandmother, to her, I mean, it was just incredible, and I couldn't put them down, but I had to get back to packing. So I realized that I had to do something with these. The letters that Billy wrote were a journal of the last few years of his life. I really got to know him through those letters. Bill wanted to be an artist, and I discovered he spent a year studying art at Carnegie Tech in Pittsburgh. It's now Carnegie Mellon University. The bond between us as artists was sealed. That's the connection we have. My book, Letters from the War, Between the Lines, honoring the late Staff Sergeant William James McCoy Jr., was begun in the mid-1990s. Because of my job and general life, it took a while to do that. So anyway, we moved from Dayton to Highland County, which is Hillsborough, Wilmington area. And in 2018, I was contacted by Tim Colliver, who was a staff writer for the local Times-Gazette paper. And somehow he found out that I liked airplanes, and I don't know how that happened, but he interviewed me, and I was telling him about my book that I was attempting to write, and so he actually wrote an article for the paper about that. And then he kept calling me and are you done with the book? Have you started on the book? Have you finished the book? I says, and when am I going to do that? Well, guess what came along in 2020? COVID.
Yeah.
I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. So he said I have to finish it. So I did. I worked on it, and I think had I published this before 2020, it wouldn't have contained half the things that are in it, because I firmly believe it was a God thing that I met through the internet, the historian from the 447 bomb group. And I saw his post on May 12th, 2020, and it was my uncle's crew on the picture, and I didn't know who Chris French was, and I said, do you have any idea how I can get a hold of some more information about the Woodstrom crew? And he says, well, I'm the historian for the 447. So 73 years after my uncle was killed, that's when I saw that post. Facebook is good for some things. So lo and behold, he sent me pictures of the plane. He sent me the missions that he was on. I don't know. It was just incredible. This book would not have been as good as it is, and without that. So I want to go to England next year. I think they're going to have a reunion. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But anyway, Bill was born and raised in Pittsburgh, as I mentioned earlier. He was on his 21st mission, May 12th, 1944, when his plane was shot down just 6 miles from the Swiss border. And they were on their way to the Zwickau, Germany aircraft repair depot. As a tail gunner, Bill would have spent the entire time engaged in combat on his knees.
Mhm.
By the way, the lifespan of a tail gunner was 2 weeks. Judging from the size of his parents and siblings, Bill was probably not a very large man, and that's probably why he was assigned to that position. When I go to the Air Force Museum and I walk around the Memphis Belle and see the tail, I lose it, because that space is about this big. And he's way at the end of the plane, and I thought, my goodness, how frightening could that be? And it's bad enough, but being in that position. I can imagine Bill in that vulnerable position, just hanging over the earth, watching enemy fighters circling like vultures around his tiny compartment. flak exploded in between the tight bomber formations. He got a clear view of many of his friends being shot down, never to return to the base in England. How lonely his position was. The slow bombers were an easy prey for the enemy, and the tail section would be a very easy target for them. Bill's letters are the heart of the book. Since there were so many, I transcribed them on my computer using a Courier font so it would look like it was on an old typewriter. The return addresses range from his first location, Camp Meade, Maryland, in October of 1942, till his last stop, November 1943, at the Army Air Base in Harvard, Nebraska, with about 8 different training bases in between. They really trained these guys. They didn't just put them in one thing and just, let them take off. After all that intensive training, he shipped out to Rattleston Air Base, England. Letters from then on went through the War Department V-mail services out of New York. I'll read excerpts from some of the letters to my mother, he called Lizzie, and my dad, Carl, while at Kingman, Arizona, and Harvard, Nebraska. Okay, April 28, 1943, Arizona. Carl, you should come up here and show some of these jerks how to handle a plane. They're always having crack-ups, and the other day one fellow almost landed without putting down his wheels. I've been doing some ground firing lately and have a pretty good score so far. I got 50 out of 50 on the 22 range today. I won't be going upstairs for a few weeks yet. They are now giving us all the ground stuff that we need to know. This training post is terrible. Imagine seeing no women for 7 weeks, except the ones that work on the post. Oh well, that's the Army. I have to close now. Take good care of Lizzie and keep on flying. May 27, 1943, Nebraska. Carl, I've been doing some flying lately too. I've made a good many missions in the Beechcraft AT-18, used for bombing, navigation, and gunnery training, and the AT-6 Advanced Trainer. It's a lot of fun shooting machine guns at the tow targets, but it's tough work. I like the AT-6 the best because they're open cockpit and you really get a thrill when you stand up at the seat and shoot. When they peel off in formation, you really know you're flying. A lot of fellows lost their ammunition when they tried to place the cans in the holder on the side of the gun. The slipstream caught them and they never saw them again. A good many guys got sick. One fellow vomited so often they called him Bucket. I must have done all right because my pilots put in a good word for me. You should see these pilots. They're crazy. They fly so close together at times that I thought they would knock each other out of the air. June 25th, 1943, Nebraska. Lizzie, they gave me another physical exam and are giving me another series of shots. This is a B-17 outfit and I can hardly wait till I get my first trip. I wish I could tell you more about it, but I just can't. The food here is all right, except that they make us use our mess kits and throw all the food into one spot. The result is that we end up with the dessert on top and the meal at the bottom. Carl, you should be here to fly a B-17. Boy, are they big babies. We are being placed in a brand new cruise. We will all train together and probably go across together. We'll still need a co-pilot, navigator, and radio man. I'm to be the tail gunner, and they say it's really rough back there. You should see what some of these guys do. One plane went up the other day and blew up in the air. Some dope made a mistake. I hope I get a good pilot because all the pilots are just as green as we are. Our officers are a good bunch of eggs. They go through the same routine that we do, and they don't act stuck up like those 90-day wonders do. August 19th, 43. Lizzie, did I tell you that our crew has been made flight leader? That means that we will all have to keep on the ball and act like we know what we're doing. Our pilot is very happy about the whole thing, the rat. He is what's known as an ass kicker, and he makes us work harder than any other crew on the field. I wish we had our former pilot with us. August 30, 1943. Lizzie, there has been quite a bit of excitement around here lately. Maybe you read about it in the paper. It's a long story, so I might as well start at the beginning. Our crew is scheduled to fly on a Saturday evening from 8 to 1. but they only took 3 of the crew with them and gave the rest of us a 2-day pass into town. We stayed in town that night, and in the morning we heard that 2 planes had cracked up near the air base. Everyone was all excited about it, and we heard all kinds of rumors. We almost went crazy worrying about the rest of the crew until we met them in town. Boy, were we relieved. Our engineer was so nervous that he could hardly hold a cup of coffee. He told us all about how it happened, and it didn't make a very nice picture. The 2 planes collided in midair while flying close formation. And if we didn't have a good pilot, the rest of the crew wouldn't be here now to tell about it. He did some fast thinking and saved the ship from getting hit too. 14 men were killed, and none of them had a chance to bail out. After what happened that evening, I wouldn't trade my pilot for anyone else. I sure changed my mind about that pilot after this. September 10th, 43. Lizzie, Carl should have been with us the other day. We were hedge hopping over the farms. You should have seen the chickens flying all over the place. The poor things were scared to death. Don't tell anyone, but at times we were only 10 feet off the ground. I can't imagine that on a B-17. Okay. September 21st, 1943. Lizzie, how's my honey getting along today? I'm feeling fine right now, except that my feet are slightly frozen, and the ride back here in the tail is rather bumpy. We have just come down from high altitude and are flying along 10,000 feet. There was ice on the windows of the tail, but most of it's gone now. The view back here is swell, but the trouble is I can't see where I am or where I'm going. I can only see where I've been. The last paragraph was composed while I was flying today. I'm back on the ground and very tired. That high altitude flying knocks the hell out of a guy. Actually, they went higher than 10,000 feet most of the time. It's 30,000, something like that, during the war. September 29th, Lizzie. I'm still flying every day and still going to school. When we fly, I get a chance to do everything from flying the plane to navigating. They certainly keep us up on the beam while we are up in the air, but of course that's the way it should be. We have been practicing with the pistol, carbine, and rifle the last 2 weeks. They say we might need to use them when we go over. Yesterday, we took a soldier up with us on one of our regular flights. When he got through, he was scared to death and said he wouldn't go up with our crew again for all the rice in China. We really have a hot pilot. I think he's the best in the field. A typical letter written once he was in Rattlesden Air Base in England was just general. In one of the letters in January 44, after a mission to Frankfurt, Germany, he wrote, well, there's certainly there isn't a lot that I can tell in my letters what's going on over there. So his typical letter would be, how is Dad? Is he feeling well? I often worry about him. I remember when I said goodbye to him at the station. He looked so pathetic standing there that I could hardly keep the tears out of my eyes. I hope Mom and Dad realize how much they mean to me. They have done so much for all of us that we can never repay them. I think about all you back home and keep looking forward to the day that I'll be back there to stay. There isn't much that I can say now, so I'll sign off. Give my love to everyone and don't forget to write. P.S. If you could get a hold of any pimento cheese and crackers, we would appreciate it very much. Our crew is always hungry. Love, Bill. Bill's last letter, May 4th, 1944, Rattlesden, England. Lizzie, I got your letter today and was very glad to hear from you. The church sent me a leaflet about the different fellows in the service. I guess I should write them a letter, but you know how often I write. Are both Mom and Dad in good health? Mom never tells me much in her letters. I got your picture too. I'll put it in with the rest of my collection. It's getting to be a rather large one now. How's Carl making out? He's probably a colonel the next time I see him. Well, kiddo, I'll sign off now. Write again soon and give everyone at home my love. So in between most of these letters that he wrote, I can't imagine you're just getting back from a mission that you came this close to not making it. And you have to sit down and you write a letter, calmly and everything's fine, the weather's great. And then knowing that you have to go back out again and do the same thing over again. So each crew member just didn't know if they were coming back or not. So my mother's last letter to Bill was dated May 14th, 1944. It was returned marked missing 708 Bomb Squadron, June 10th, 1944. In my book, I put my original drawings, and there's some up there on the table. And the airplane, the model of his plane was made by Tim Polliver, who interviewed me in that Times Gazette paper. And then I wrote in between, or after some of the letters, I wrote prose and thinking, what did he really mean when he was writing that letter? What was he really feeling? So this was after one of his letters, and I'll read this. Will this be the hour of our devastation? Can we hang on to this tenuous life much longer? Mission after mission, counting the minutes until furlough. Our ship rocks with each explosion, stubbornly gliding forward through puffs of black smoke. Staccato bits of gunfire and flak from below encompass us. The enemy's quick buzzing insects swarm around our ship. Our slow-moving giant seems still as a target, watching helplessly as friends are shot down. Moments of silence, a tribute to them who have to wait. Prayers raise up, thou shalt not kill. Visibly defending the menacing cargo we carry, sweat beads on our brow. Bombardier's button releases over the target. Patterns of fiery circles dot the patchwork landscape below. The cries of pain never reach our ears. What gives us the right to take others' lives? Self-defense is our goal at this moment in time. Pilot, turn us around in the direction of quiet. We will heal the world when we're safe on the ground. Now I wrote a poem called Telegram, and I was trying to think how my grandmother, what her reaction was when she got the news that her son was killed. The floorboards of the front porch creaked under the weight of the rocker's heavy, steady rhythm. The fingers of the woman's hands worked the yarn around two long needles in a memorized motion. The toe of the blue sock appeared out of the knitter's cadence, the needles clicking together in a thoughtful melody. Plain wire eyeglasses slipped down further on the tip of her nose, and she skipped a beat to urge the indispensable nooses back in place. The late summer breeze was welcome refreshment, cooling her forehead. Wisp of graying hair danced around her small round face. It was the fragment of the day when the sun told her it was time to prepare dinner. Her mind wandered, though, and her thoughts turned to Billy far away overseas fighting that awful war. Perhaps later in the evening she would make cookies for him and wrap them for their long journey to England. They would most surely arrive stale and dry, yet her son would know that his mother's loving concern accompanied the tin. Footsteps startled her. She stopped her synchronized motion. Looking up, she saw a young man approaching. Clear blue eyes peered out from under the uniform's hat brim, and his hand outstretched with an envelope as he confirmed her identity. The sewing skewers and unfinished sock dropped in her lap. Her heart stopped beating as the rocker rested in a forward position. She took the stranger's offering into her shaking hands as he wished her God's blessing. She tried not to think of what the dreaded wrapper held. Her heart knew the truth. She tore slowly at the government's cold envelope, removed the single paper. Her vision became clouded. Sorrow stung her eyes. The ink from the regret word floated in a teardrop on the paper. This book was just a labor of love for me, and wow. I just did it to honor his memory and to the memory of people, the men and women who served for our nation, for our freedom. So I organized the book, I did it myself, I designed the cover, I typed everything in it, my heart and soul went into it. So, if, I encourage people who purchase the book to share it with young people so that they know true history. So I have a video that we need to show that my friend Amber Foster made it for me, and I thought she did an excellent job. So thank you.
Yeah, you gotta have the mindset that it's gonna happen to the other guy.
Yeah.
That's,
You do. I don't know how they did it
yeah,
every day.
like you say, it's gonna happen to the other guy, so don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I want to share a true story with you. My name is Elaine Balsley, and I would like to introduce you to my late uncle, whom I never knew, Staff Sergeant William James McCoy Jr. Billy was killed in World War II during his 21st mission over Germany when he and his B-17 crew were shot down just 6 miles from the safety of the Swiss border. Shells from enemy aircraft split their plane in two. Bill's parents, both Irish immigrants, were older and took their son's loss extremely hard. My mother and my aunt kept all Bill's letters, photographs, and other documents for years since the 1940s. I could tell from the now yellowed and dog-eared letters that they had been opened and read many, many times, so they could recall all the memories they had with their brother. Since I was a little girl, they often talked about Billy and the fact that he loved art and wanted to become an artist. In fact, after high school, he enrolled in Carnegie Tech, now Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and completed 1 year studying art. There is only one piece of art left of Bill's, and that watercolor is now hanging in my home. Because of our mutual love of art, even though I never met my uncle, a close bond has been established between us. Billy joined the U.S. Army Air Corps when he was 20 years old and was assigned to the 447th Bomb Group, 708th Squadron. He had been working at a propeller manufacturing company after his year in college when he enlisted. After training, Bill's assigned position was a tail gunner on the B-17 Flying Fortress. He and his crew were stationed at the Army Air Base in Rattlesden, England. Some of the buildings and sections of the runway are still there. For a tail gunner, there wasn't much room at the rear of the bomber, separated somewhat from the rest of the crew, just hanging out there over the earth with threatening enemy fighters circling around. A tail gunner spent most of his time in combat on his knees. P-51 Mustangs and other Allied fighters did their best to protect all the bombers that were trying to maintain a tight formation while en route to the target zone. Because of limited fuel, the fighters were restricted as to the length of time and distance they were able to escort the bombers and had to turn back to their base in England. B-17s flew at an altitude of 18 to 25,000 feet. The crew's protection against the bitter cold was just a leather jacket with a wool collar, a helmet, goggles, oxygen mask, and gloves. Not only did the crew have to fight off the enemy, but had to protect themselves from serious frostbite. The average temperature at that altitude would have been about 30 degrees below zero or lower. 8 hours was probably the length of an average mission in the plane with no pressurized cabin or heat. Many of these photographs were taken recently at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dayton. Each time I go there and walk around the Memphis Belle, the B-17 that is currently on display, I tear up when I see the tail gunner turret. When I think of how vulnerable that position was, I cannot imagine how terrifying it was for Billy to be sitting up there with little or no protection, while enemy aircraft are shooting at him and his teammates, and flak is floating all around him. When I came across the old documents in my mother's basement back in the 90s, I knew I had to do something with them so people will get to know Bill through these letters as I have. you to enjoy today. This book, Letters from the War Between the Lines, was a labor of love and may be purchased through Amazon.com and the Air Force Museum, Dayton, Ohio.
Do you have any questions?
A million. How old was he, that last mission?
20.
20?
So Elaine had mentioned about the stature of the people who flew in the tail as well as in the ball turret. The gentleman with the leather flight jacket, he was also a tail gunner on a B-17, flying out of North Africa and Italy, and obviously he survived the war. After his 25 missions, he went back to Texas and was a gunnery instructor. His brother, who fought in the infantry, however, did not make it back. But that gives you an idea of, you know, some 6-foot guy is not gonna.
Well, he looked tall next to his parents, though.
Well,
But
my
usually
grandmother,
happens.
my grandmother was his
Yeah,
size.
his parents must have been really short because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, my mother's family, they were thin. You know,
Yeah.
they took after my
Because
granddad.
he was quite a bit taller than they must have been really short, yeah.
Yeah, but imagine, when I did a talk at the Champaign Air Museum up in Urbana, they're building a B-17 up
Yeah.
there, if you don't know about that. I got to meet a veteran who was a tail gunner. He made 35 missions, and he said one of the bullets came right past his ear. You know, it's like, oh man, how do you survive that? It's just. Did you watch Masters of the Air? It's a new series. It's on Apple TV, and it's about the closest depiction of what it was like when you took off in a B-17 and when hit all those. You know, you've got fighter plane. The enemy fighters are buzzing around you like flies, and flak is exploding, and you can see, you know, wings taken off of the planes, and people just can't, you know, don't have time to jump out or anything.
So many of them that's getting a spin and they were centrifugal force just pinned them inside.
Yeah.
When they
That's
were
right.
getting out.
Yeah, so it had to be frightening, and I don't know how these guys did it, and they're all young. I mean, they're probably in their early 20s or maybe even under that, so, I don't know how they had the courage to get back up and do it again. But that's what war is, you know, but he knew what he was fighting for. He knew what he was, doing. Because the oppression, what the Nazis were doing was just terrible. Anyway, any other questions? No?
Well, we have a couple things for you.
Okay.
First, fingers will begin to operate as advertised.
As a,
We have the certificate of appreciation for you,
oh, thank you so much, I appreciate
and it says the Miami Valley Military History Museum Certificate of Appreciation. To all who shall see these presents, reading, the certificate is awarded to Elaine Balsley in recognition of her support to our programs, of her continued dedication, commitment, and support to the ideals of patriotism this 10th day of April in the year 2024.
that. Oh, thank you
So
so much.
take that with our thanks.
Appreciate it.
And interestingly enough, last month's speaker also wrote a book of letters about one of his relatives. In addition, he's a helicopter pilot. He's done all sorts of stuff.
Mhm.
But this, is
Oh.
about his uncle, Fred Marshall, and his letters home from World War I. We thought you'd like to have that.
Yes, absolutely, thank you. Thank you so much, I appreciate that.
And of course, we appreciate you coming out.
Oh, no, you're welcome, you're quite welcome.
Okay, any final questions, comments, complaints?
Oh, it's just a shame that people didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Well, once again, the weather gods have conspired against
Yeah,
us.
I know.
Yeah. But if you would like to purchase the book, on Amazon, it's almost $40, and today you can get it for $30. And it's the reason I insisted on it being hardbound and in color, because I wanted people to see that these guys were real. When you add color, they come to life, so to speak. So that's why it's a little bit more expensive than any other books.
All right, Elaine, well, it's great
Oh,
to
thank you.
meet you finally,
Yeah,
and don't be a stranger, of course.
okay, I won't, yeah.
And you know, as usual, tell your friends, family to come out regardless of the
Of the
weather.
weather.
Yeah, right.
All right, last call for questions. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, young lady.